Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. So in today's video we're going to be talking about the Gladiator circuit weeks 3 and 4 Battlegrounds meta, because even though it doesn't start for another 2 weeks, for the most part people still want to know which champions are going to be useful in it, so they can kind of plan and base their rank ups around. So I will effectively share my findings in the off-season with you, because I did in fact play quite a bit of friendly matches with friends and fierce competitors. Kind of see what works best and what doesn't, which champions are more scary than normal and which just simply do not work. And that is the first thing. A lot of champions do not work in any meaningful regard in this meta. I quite like this meta for the most part. It wasn't too bad. So let's break down the notes. When the defender gains a buff, they also gain 10% energized buff for 12 seconds, max stacks 10. Honestly, for the most part, you kind of completely forgot about it, and when it does kind of come into play, half the time that you're happy that it does, because it's easier for you to push the opponents past certain bars of power in many fights, or it just gives you food for Mystic Champions. Because even if you have knocked them down and they are nullify immune, those things still start expiring sooner or later, and they can feed your Mystic Dispersion. So this isn't that much of an issue for the most part. It will be a problem with Galen, however. So Galen is going to be significantly more annoying. If you do not have a great counter for him, then he's just going to eat your lunch. Galen's actually great for both the metas, the Mystic one and for this one as well. Because again, whenever he activates special attack, he gains buffs that immediately gives him the energized buffs, and he's gonna go and explode in no time. Next up, we have Stunning Reflection, Bleed and Shock. So effectively, you can't stun your opponent unless you're using a Bleed and Shock champion. And if you are using one of those two champions, you pretty much have the 40% Fury passive active in all times, which makes some of the champs significantly more dangerous than they normally would be, because it's a fairly substantial damage increase. That gives rise to auto-banning the ball-headed demon. Okoye is just a menace. So, but a minor setback, the attacker's Unbreak and Nullify immune, knocking the defender disables this immunity for 15 seconds. It's annoying, but it's mainly the being unable to stun what kind of gives you the problems here. So the meta itself is fairly open, but first things first, we definitely need to point out a few champions that will work significantly worse. For instance, with Thanos, you need to be careful to drop your well, you can't passively stun your opponent here, so it is significantly harder to use him, because when you passive stuns also count for it. And they're armor break immune as well. That means you need to drop a level 1 before you even attempt to stun them. And then if you do, you cannot be chaining that heavy attack from your combo, because that's going to be a passive stun. So he can be used. It's just not in quite as many matchups and not quite as well. There are several champions that just do atrociously bad due to the nodes. One important shout out here is America Chavez. Her passive stun counts, so it's not a good time. America Chavez is not a good time, not a good choice. Also, a champion like Kushala gets fairly significantly hindered. You can still get away with using Kushala if you parry opponent's special attacks. You can still get that blessing, but it's a major intrusion on her playstyle. So I'm personally not running Kushala in this meta because she's just significantly harder to use due to that. Another obviously key option that would be Kate Bishop. Where is that Kate? Her stun again gets you stunned, so you do not necessarily want to do that. She's not making the deck. We have a few champions here, for instance, where is the Negasonic Teenage Warhead. Her passive stuns also do not work, so you do not necessarily want to bring her in, especially against somebody like Bullseye and stuff. Again, if you don't parry, you can still use her, but it's not the bestest test of the times. Right, so what actually does work great? Well, let's start with some of the MVPs. Gentle is basically built for this. Gentle is as good as he will ever be in this meta, because every time you try to parry your opponent, you trigger your stun immunity, which inflicts pursuit on the opponent, shutting down everybody's evade. And additionally, when the opponent purifies or cleanses stun buff or triggers immunity, gain unstoppable, indestructible, and you still get your opening, and you can be mega aggressive. So gentle is crazy and one of the best bullseye counters in this meta. How dust is an interesting interaction because whenever you do a well-timed block, you glance, and glance reduces opponent's ability accuracy by 100%, and that includes the node. So with dust, you can actually still parry and not get stunned. So that's good. So Dust is perfectly usable kind of offensively with additional safety net, and she can take block damage and nothing bad happens. And additionally, she's shock and bleed immune, so opponent cannot get that 40% fury and cannot disable the node. You have easier time fighting her. And also Dust is not the type of champion that you want hitting in your block, baiting out heavy attacks because of the potential to whip up the Sandstorm, so she's quite good. Deadpool X-Force is just a menace. That 40% fury increase on his bleed damage is very, very big, very significant. You have the node disabled just about the entire time. In many of the matchups, it's enough with a level 1 to finish off your opponent if you're using like a rank 3 on a rank 3 champion. And yeah, he does work very, very well. Okoye is, to me, it's an auto ban. I do not have a 7-star Okoye. I have a 6-star rank 5 that I can ascend, and I probably will now. But that put aside, every time I see a 7-star Okoye, I just ban her because she's already a nuke. She's already one of the best bullseye counters in the game. And with these nodes that give her 40% extra fury, it's not a pretty sight. She's insane here. And now how Hitmonkey, again, 40% extra fury does do, quite well for him. Mantis is good because, well, she doesn't rely on stun at all in any of her gameplay, so you can play her basically perfectly normally, especially against the matchups that she typically would be needed against somebody like Photon. Her sleep mechanic is not stun, so that can't get reflected, and she's perfectly viable and useful and important. Nick Fury, again, if you do happen that's his second life, he's stun immune, but also has constant and immediate access to bleed, plus the improved damage, makes him more viable offensively, especially now with the 7-star coming out by the week 3 and 4. And yeah, he's going to be quite big. Then we have Chilled, again, super easy access to bleeds. You can cleanse those stuns as well if you do accidentally get them. She does quite well. And Bullseye is obviously a bit of a menace on defense because there aren't too many great counters to Bullseye in this meta. Because again, Mr. Sinister, you do not want to be doing that. And Onslaught is significantly harder to take Bullseye down with it. And Negasonic doesn't work. And with that, he's much tougher defender to counter, and on top of it all, his instant bleeds also disable the node and give you the 40% fury increase. Therefore, he's, okay to use offensively in this meta too, because with him, unlike with most champions, you're actually going to be able to parry most of the time, and with him, you're going to get that 40% attack increase. He's still not going to be a nuke, but he's going to be competent enough attacker to at least finish some fights in a decent time. And we have Zola. Zola's just made even more annoying. There's just no great way to put this. Zola is annoying. You see it at the moment. I see him, I ban him. That's about as simple as that. Shuri, very good. Obviously, instant, immediate access to the shocks. Shock damage gets increased, so she is faster than she normally would be, which is quite nice. She's also quite easy and handy to use, and obviously still perfectly viable for every single one of her matchups that she previously was used for. So Shuri does fine. She's solid. Starhand Spider-Man still does very, very great. One thing you cannot do effectively is you cannot go on your level 1 nuke rotation, which does make him a little bit less versatile. For instance, he can still do Bullseye, but you will have to bait out special attack from Bullseye, which will mean that you take like 10% of your max health as damage in a general fight against Bullseye. So he's still one of the good options against him. He's just not as good as normal. But on the bright side, your level 2s hit harder, and after level 2 you do get a 40% fury boost. So he's still usable. Again, just need to be careful not to parry by accident anyway. We do have Prowler, works perfectly fine. The one thing that you do kind of miss is the heavies at the beginning of the fight. You can kind of get away with it with just, block baiting a heavy attack and punching with your own in some of the matchups. But the extra openings from the Falter are quite nice, so you can, get openings without having to rely on parry. And for the most part, he's still fairly usable. And then we have Red Skull, again, has access to shock after his level 2 initially. You will have to rely on your intercepts for the most part, but again, he is still a decent add in the deck in these circumstances. Guardian's very good because his instant shock also disables the node, and that's all you kind of need. You get a bit of extra damage on your Guardian, why not? And he in general is a very capable Polygon's champion too. Spider-Ham. Spider-Ham is quite decent two-way champion. He's one of the science champions that works reasonably well without being unable to stun your opponent. He's just like one of the guys that actually does work well enough. He, can be annoying enough defender if you have gotten rid of the She-Devil and a handful of other skill champions. Because if opponent can't parry stun the Ham, the fights can turn out to be a bit more dangerous as well. We have Titania. Again, extra openings without needing to rely on stun is effectively what lets her work quite well. Also, you can easily get repeated knockdowns with her, just disabling that armor break and nullify stagger immunity. And yeah, there's absolutely nothing stopping Titania. Thing is quite a good defender because again, he cannot be stunned, and he cannot be stunned because he is shock and bleed immune. And with the shock and bleed immune, there's no way to disable the stunning reflection against him, and then he just becomes ever so more annoying. All right, let's move on. Photon. Photon is very good for a couple of reasons. Number one, the main reason is her phasing once you do stun the opponent. So when you do stun the opponent, you trigger your invisibility, 2.5 seconds. With Limber, effectively, your phasing is going to be longer than the stun on you, and your opponent's going to be hitting on you. And that will help you ramp up quicker. So Photon ramps up faster than she normally would. Only thing you need to pay attention to is the cooldown of her invisible ability. But yeah, it's quite cool. Spiral's here because she's one of the better counters remaining for Serpent. So she's quite important for this meta because again, Kushala is significantly harder to use. You can still get away with it, but she's much harder to use in other matchups against Serpent. Still more annoying because you cannot start the fight with the parry heavy. You need to, get in that intercept and then parry some of the hits of the special attack and then heavy him after the special attack. And it just makes it more finicky. But again, Kushala is still usable, just not the best. And Chavez is completely out of the question, basically. And Spiral kind of does the best, really, of your mainstream Serpent counters. Maybe Shatter does even better, because the Spiral you still have to alter the playstyle a little bit. Jugs, obviously, is absolutely crazy. There's absolutely nothing inhabiting Jugs. Jugs doesn't really care for parry stunts in order to gain openings, and he's an absolute nuke. He's still dominant against Shatra, one of the better champions here, because she doesn't ever care about the nullify immunity for the most part either, because you do have the atrophy kind of doing that work for you. If opponent gains those energizes, that's just food for Mystic Dispersion either way, even without you nullifying them or whatever. And yeah, there's nothing stopping her from delivering her damage. Very, very good. Werewolf by Night, again, just due to the sheer idea that he doesn't particularly care if you hit opponent's block or you hit them directly often. So even if you, can't get an opening, you can still perfectly carry on with your game plan. I know that he's not everybody's cup of tea, but yeah, he's good for both of the metas this season. Now, moving into Cosmic class, Noah is still, yet again, quite annoying because, well, he's a Nullify Immune Noah. And in order to get rid of his Nullify Immunity, opponent needs to knock him down, which is not that easy, considering they can't parry, so even re-parry is out of the question. Baiting out a heavy attack against Noah typically would be fairly health costly affair. And him gaining buffs gives him energize, so he's gonna spam even more special attacks. So there are obviously counters to him, but he is quite a bit more annoying than normal, let's say. And offensively, he's still perfectly capable. He doesn't really rely on parry stance for openings. His playstyle doesn't demand it, so it works out quite decently well for him. And obviously, Serpent is more annoying than he normally would be. So overall, I must say, this is quite interesting meta. I look forward to playing it for sure. Let me know what are and have been your MVPs so far in this meta. I hear good things about Adam Warlock, for instance. You can't level 1 with him in this meta, though, but still quite decent. So yeah, let me know, and I'll catch you guys soon. Bye. Bye-bye. Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. So